David works across the entire business from SEO and engineering through to growth marketing and platform operations to enable growth and drive performance. David is an advocate of personal development, loves working out in the gym, as you will observe shortly, meditating and travelling the world. Please give him a big round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Simon. Great introduction. So welcome everyone. Today I'm going to tell you the story of why we deleted 130 million pages from our architecture, which represents about 97% of the entire site. Let's start straight in. So we as a team really felt like the kid at the top of these bales of hay, where the bales of hay gets in Tradeline's architecture, and there's so many pages and we're not quite sure where the value is. And I think it also represents Googlebot. We're basically asking them to try and find a needle in a haystack of all these pages, but we're not quite sure which ones we should be asking them to crawl. And as a result, it felt like we were wasting money, and we wanted Google to be crawling the correct pages. So what we did is we set out to try and understand where the value was, and we went from there. I'm going to skip over my intro, apart from just to say that it'd be great to connect with you on LinkedIn. I'm always looking to learn from others in the industry. A little bit about Tradeline, just for a show of hands, how many in the room have heard of Trainline? Okay, cool. I hope that will be the case. A very brief bit about us. So we sell tickets on behalf of 270 rail and coach companies. We actually operate all around the world. We've got a really awesome app, which I hope many of you use today. And our platform's hosting over 90 million visits a month, and the majority of these are on mobile. So really this whole project started with crawl budget, and to just briefly define what it is, so it's crawl rate limit plus crawl demand. Crawl rate limit is all around how fast the pages load, are there any errors in those pages, and then crawl demand is all around how stale or how fresh are those pages. And the boss file still below gives some really good insights into crawl budget. So how do we get to a place with so much bloats? Well, the customer came to us rather than us going to them. And what I mean by this is we had a mechanism in place on our training times pages, there's one here, where if the customer searched in our widget here, but we didn't have a route live on our website, it would automatically create that in 5 different languages. So that's English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian. But the problem with this is we weren't accounting for localized demand, so it creates it in all those 5 languages regardless of whether there is actually demand for the page. So we had cases where I think a little route called Sido to Munich, which is a German route, we had that in 5 languages, but it wasn't necessarily relevant to some of the other markets. So from there we seeked to find value. We did it in 2 main ways, using external and internal data. So the external data was using the Google Ads API. We queried route-to-route combinations across Europe, so for example London to Paris and so on, to understand where the value was. Now there are around 300 million combinations, so we couldn't obviously do all of those, it would have taken ages. So what we did instead is just refine the list, and we got to around 10 million or so. So we had a list of all the valuable routes in each market, and then we combined that with Google Search Console and Google Analytics data. So the Search Console data was within a 2.5-year period, a page was included in the list, it had a single impression, and then from GA, it had a single session. And the reason we used 2.5 years, and it was also pre-COVID, is because we wanted to make sure seasonality wasn't involved, and ultimately, if I'm getting loads of pages, I don't want to be getting rid of anything that actually had value. So what was the data showing? Well, Google was crawling valuable pages on average between 1 and 3 weeks, which is actually quite infrequent if we are looking to make changes to these pages and we hope for them to rank. On average, 36% of all monthly crawls to pages that were not valuable. So this is a third of all crawls were completely wasted, and I must admit we did feel a bit like Gordon Ramsay here. Are you kidding me? Number 3, we had inadequate internal linking architecture, and actually this is a big one for the project. only 36% of all pages were discoverable through the internal links. And I guess I should say that a huge proportion of the 130 million weren't actually part of the architecture at all, part of the internal linking architecture. But the problem with that 36% is, now that we have the list of valuable pages, there was actually a lot of pages within that that weren't valuable. So just to dive into this a little bit more, this is a chart from Botify, and the blue section represents crawled by Botify only, so that means it's in part of our internal linking architecture. And then the red box is the Orphans, and that's only crawled by Google. Now really what we wanted is the sweet spot in the middle, for it to be crawled by Google and Botify together. It means it's part of the architecture and it's valuable. One second, let's take some water. Not that. So our project goals. We wanted to delete 130 million pages that had no value. So these were, once we had the final list of all the valuable pages, these were the remainers, which obviously is a huge amount. We wanted to achieve 100% internal link coverage. So we wanted to change that 36% to 100%, but actually have every single valuable page on our website in internal links. We wanted to reach 90% Googlebot crawl share to valuable pages. Now, obviously, 100% would be the ultimate goal, but we saw some legacy 301s and others that were crawled, and we knew that it was going to be very difficult to get to 100%. And we also wanted to improve average position of optimized URLs. So an optimized URL was any page that had never been part of our internal linking architecture before, but was being brought into the structure. So the first thing we did is we built a new internal linking architecture. So we got around a whiteboard with our dev team, and we started to look at all the components on our training times pages and try and understand how we could get to this place where everything was part of the structure. And also a side note to this, this project wouldn't have been possible without the relationship we have with our dev team. And actually over the last 3-4 years, we've built a really good relationship with them, and we are aligned with their goals and they're aligned with ours. So it is possible, but it just requires a lot of work. So I'm really pleased to say we did get to 100% internal link coverage, and we did it through the use of our looking for more ideas component here. So the first 2 columns give value to the highest value pages on our website. So for example, London to Paris or Paris to Brussels. And then the third column, kind of random routes, and we utilize that column to get us to ensure that we get through all of the pages on our website. So at the same time, we also orphaned roughly 1.5 million pages. So that orphaning basically just means removing it from the internal links. So these are pages that were part of our architecture but actually held no value. Then we waited 6 months because we wanted to see what happened with the orphan pages in terms of crawl performance, and also we needed time to prepare, because although this was mostly dynamic, we still had loose internal links to these pages kind of throughout the website, so we needed to get rid of those. So we observed an improvement in crawl performance, but it definitely wasn't enough. So from April to November, you can see the 800k became 1.7 million, but we knew we needed to go further. So we deleted these 5 million pages that had no value, and these were training times pages that were kind of the majority of the pages taking up the crawl budget. So what this looks like for the customer, if it was a 410 page, so it's a deleted page, it just has a simple message of gone. Now customers, theory, apart from maybe on my team, would never see these pages because we cut them completely from their view, remove them from the sitemaps and so on. And then what it looked like in practice in a 200 page is we had the language picker here, and for example in this German route there is no Spanish version, whereas before the change there would have been a Spanish version there. So this basically represents in that route, in those 4 languages there is value. But 5 billion was nowhere near enough. I'm wondering if everyone was thinking what about the other 125? Well, these were found later in the project. And these are basically a duplicate version of every one of our UK Trainline pages across 6 subdomains. So these were legacy pages that were created before our time at Trainline. And I think in the UK there were about 12.5 million root-to-root combinations. So if you multiply that by 6, you get to about 62.5 million. And then we also had a version in HTTP and HTTPS. Because I think when we did the migration back in the day, these pages were just not included. And the reason we found them is because of Google's call stats report, which came out, I think, January, February time. So as you can see, the top level domain, there was 100 million crawl requests. And then these are the subdomains. They didn't represent a huge amount of crawl budget, but it's still multi-million, and as a result, we wanted to get rid of them because they have absolutely no value whatsoever. So once we did that, we monitored. And I've got to give credit here to Tristan, who's sitting on the front row from Ticketmaster, a friend. And we were chatting about this, and we were trying to understand how we could monitor the de-indexation of the 410s. So what we did is we uploaded sitemaps to GSC, including these 410s, and then we monitored. So in a 6-week period, 86% of these pages were deleted. And then we got to the point where Google started to crawl our 410s again and again that had been de-indexed. So I think 6 weeks in, we were like, right, let's get rid of these from GSC, remove the sitemaps, and then let's see what happens with crawling the 410s. So the results. Google got crawl share improved to 87%, so 3% under the goal, but it was still a pretty big win. As you can see from stage 1 to stage 2, when we just did the Orphan and internal linking, there was quite a big fluctuation. And actually, after that, once we did the 410s, and over the last sort of 6 months in particular, it's really trended upwards. But unfortunately, Google is still calling our 410s, and I'll come on to that a little later on. The progression is obvious here, so 3 times more URLs are crawled by Googlebot and Botify than when we started. So that 800K has become 2.5 million, which is great. We do still have some orphans that are being crawled. It's because there's a little bit more work we need to do to finish off this project later in the year. From an average position point of view, we saw a really good win. So for every page that was an orphan that did rank, it went from P8 to P6. And then a kind of big bonus to this project, and one we didn't really think about when we were doing it, is depth, so that's the number of clicks a page is from the home page. The distribution beforehand was about 1 to 16, so there's loads of, still not that many pages down there, but still they're never really getting crawled. And we've now shrunk that to between 1 and 7, and the average is now 5, but it was at 7. So this is probably my favourite part of the talk, the learnings. It's absolutely not enough to just remove the sitemaps from GSC if you want to prevent crawling. You must also delete the files too, so completely delete them off your server. Or so we thought. We noticed that Google was still crawling our 410s about a month after we deleted the sitemaps, and we were like, well, what's going on? We thought, we know that the crawl queue is a part of it. But then we did some more research, and we found this Google's long-term memory term. And what that means, I've never heard of this before, but it means that if a page has been in the index at any moment in time, it may be crawled at some point. And because we have millions of 410s, Google is coming back and crawling these pages. So it's kind of reducing over time, but it's still happening, unfortunately. From a de-indexation point of view, I kind of was speaking to a few people in the industry, and we were expecting all these 410s to be de-indexed within about 48 hours. But unfortunately, that didn't take the time to account for Google needing to crawl through all the pages. I think I kind of assumed that crawl demand would increase for that kind of few days, but it didn't. It just kind of stayed the same, and as a result, because we had millions of pages, it took Google time to de-index them. As I mentioned, in our case at least, Google is crawling the 410s again and again and again, and then some more. And it is reducing, but it is something I think important to bear in mind if anyone in the room is looking to do a project of this. From a research perspective, if you think you found the answer, I urge you to keep looking. I think if we had understood Google's long-term memory from the start, we could have set maybe better expectations on how long it was going to take to get to 90% crawl share. Still not there, and I think the business has been fine about that, but it would just be good for us if we knew early on. And then my final point today, you can research all day long, but ultimately it's important to be led by your data, and I would recommend making a judgment call based on that. Thank you very much everyone. I've been David Lewis.